Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of the Career Talks by Welcome Solutions. In these meetings, we talk with professionals who took interesting avenues in their careers and made some brave career decisions. And I would like to, if you would like to see more of this content, then please hit the subscribe button. And also, please comment under the movie. We'll take all your comments. It's highly appreciated. And today I have a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Carmen Rietdijk, who obtained her PhD in neuroscience from Utrecht University in 2016. In her PhD, she investigated the molecular mechanisms underlying Parkinson's disease. And today she is actively involved in politics and the representative of the Dutch Liberal Democrats Party, also known as D66, in the city council of Utrechtse Heuvelrug. She covers the topics related to youth, families, education, healthcare, environment, and culture. Next to her political career, Carmen is also a certified coach and offers one-to-one coaching to PhD candidates through her company CDR Coaching. She supports PhD candidates who struggle with issues of motivation, emotional well-being, and stress. She coaches PhD candidates at all stages of their PhD, whether they are trying to find their way in their first year, facing a lack of motivation and confidence later on, or are wrestling with the last steps towards their PhD defense. And she also writes a blog about how to cope with grad school. Welcome, Carmen. It's great to have you here, and I'm very happy that you accepted our invitation. And now I would like to give the floor to you so that you can tell your story from your own perspective. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Natalia, for this nice introduction. So my name is Carmen Rietdijk, and like Natalia said, at the moment I'm an entrepreneur, a PhD coach, and I'm a politician in my local government. I was asked to tell you about my career path. So if we start at university, I started at a bachelor of pharmacy to become a pharmacist. And after a year, I discovered that although I liked learning about drugs and how they work, I didn't want to be a pharmacist. It was just not the kind of job that I would enjoy. So you would think that maybe I could have figured it out before starting, but apparently not. So instead of becoming a pharmacist, I chose to do a research track, which led me to a master's of neuroscience. And that's really my passion when it comes to science. I really like studying the brain and how it works. I think that's very interesting. So when I finished my master's degree, the master's degree I did was really aimed at becoming a researcher, so it felt natural to start a PhD. And I found a position at the same university where I had studied. So that was a natural fit. I went back to some of the people I still knew at pharmacy, and I studied immune receptors on neurons in the intestines in Parkinson's disease patients. And the idea is that maybe in a subset of patients, Parkinson's disease actually starts in the intestines years before you can see the telltale symptoms. So I studied that for 6 years, in fact. And I did research in the lab with cells. I cultured neurons and I tried to stimulate them and measure things. And in fact, those cells didn't really want to grow, like at all. So that made it hard. And during that time, I also got a kid. So I was out of the running for a while because pregnancy made me really sick. And at some point, my research was just still not going that well. And there was not much else I could do, just try to make those cells grow. And the funding for my project ran out. And I know I'm not the first one in the Netherlands, at least, to run into that problem. So I decided that I needed a job on the side, or on the side I needed a job and then also keep the job of doing the PhD. So basically doing 2 jobs just to earn a living. And during my PhD, I had found out that I really enjoyed teaching. So I decided to accept a teaching job at a different university. And I worked there for 2 years. And in the meantime, they also wanted me to finish my PhD. And I was a young mother. So all those things together put me under a lot of stress. It was hard to keep up. And then on top of that, there was an issue with medication I'm taking, and it led to a breakdown. I still cannot really say, what part was the medication, what part was the stress of the circumstance, but altogether, I just couldn't, I couldn't do it anymore. And I needed to recover. So I was out of work for about 9 months again before I was back reintegrated into my job. And in fact, the moment that I was going to be back full time, they told me that I couldn't keep my job anymore because, I hadn't been a reliable employee. And although they cannot say that, that's what happened. And again, I wouldn't be the first one that this happens to. So I was out of a job. I had my PhD, but, that doesn't pay the bills. So I really was wondering, what do I want to do? What do I enjoy doing? And I figured that I wanted to help PhDs who were going through a rough PhD trajectory because that was my own experience. During my PhD, I had several mentors, but for different reasons, none of them really gave me the support that I actually needed at the time. So yeah, I was very lonely. My project didn't really, I didn't really collaborate with other colleagues I had because they used different techniques and stuff. So even though we worked on similar questions, nobody could really help me out in a practical sense either. So it was hard and it was lonely and I didn't enjoy that at all. And looking back at it, I'm convinced that it can be easier and it can be better. So yeah, I decided I wanted to coach PhD candidates who are going through a rough patch. The PhD dip in Dutch is very common. So I took a year training and I became a certified coach and I started my company. And that's what I'm still doing. I have to say that Corona has made it a lot harder because I've been at home with my kid for months on end because the schools were closed, and that really didn't help my company. But it's still there, and I'm still doing it, and I enjoy it, so that's good. And then the other side of my current professional life is politics, which I started getting interested in during my PhD. Now, I was always somebody who would go vote and who would sort of follow the news in general. And there was a friend of mine. He was active in politics, and that's how I became a member of D66, which is the party I'm at right now. And yeah, over the years, it slowly grew. And especially when we moved into our own first home, a home that we bought, I knew that we were going to stay there. So I wanted to become more active in local politics. And starting by just joining some meetings, getting to know some people, it grew into the position where I am now as a councilwoman of the gemeente of Utrechtse Heuvelrug. I'm one out of 29 people who is in that position, and together we make the decisions for the gemeente. Yeah, and the nice thing about that is, especially compared to academia, it's so broad and it's so relevant to society. It matters the kind of decisions you make, and especially the social domain that I'm in, like Natalia described. It matters how we interact with schools, which kind of housing we provide for them. It matters to the people who work there and the kids who go to school there. So it's really different from academia, where it's a very intellectual exercise, and especially fundamental research is so far removed from reality, I would like to say, that that this is a whole different experience, and I feel it's much more fulfilling, in fact. So yeah, I'm happy with the things I'm doing right now, and I think that's the story of how I ended up here.
Great, thank you so much for your story. Actually, a comment that comes to my mind is, when I think about it, then it seems to me that absolutely everything is more useful than academic academic research. Not only politics, but anything you can come up with that is in the outer world, it's in one way or another provides for citizen and residents, right? Either as a product or as a service. So pretty much everything is more down to earth and useful than fundamental research that we do in academia. So I totally get what you're saying about this fulfilling aspect of doing politics, because I have the same feeling while doing what I'm doing right now. But actually, I'm curious. Just there are so many topics we could touch here, because you have so many different you did so many different things. But let me ask about this politics aspect first. So actually, I was wondering about that. So where do politics come from? Where politicians? Because politics is one of these areas where you don't go there because you have you finished you graduated from 5-year studies in politics, right? There is nothing like it. It's something you just become a politician in the process. First you're interested, then you become some form of activist, you become engaged, and at some point you get public trust enough to get elected, right? And then so it's really streetwise, it's something that comes it's bottom up, right? It comes from the street, and you have to first get engaged and then get elected. And I'm actually curious how it happened for you. So do you when you look back at your life, were there any signs at any time in your past that would tell you now that it was obvious that I would become a politician, I just couldn't see that early enough? Or do you think that this is quite recent and you changed and this is a next stage in your life?
Well, there are different things I can answer to that. Maybe the first thing that comes to mind is some friends of mine who responded like, oh yeah, we could always see you doing something like that. And sometimes you cannot see your own best qualities, for instance, because you're too close to yourself. I think two things that stand out to me now is that I've always been opinionated about everything, basically. And sometimes people would say I'm a know-it-all and they would be annoyed with me. And, I think that's one aspect of my personality. And I always have opinions about stuff. And the second thing is I like to talk. I don't mind sharing my opinions. I don't mind speaking to a group. I don't mind defending my stance on something and, being in an argument, not like a fight, but just an argument, differing in opinion and trying to understand each other better and either reach a shared conclusion or not. Sometimes that's okay too. Those things, they were always part of my personality. So I think those really stood out from a very early age.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, and I care. I care about my environment, about people. Yeah.
Actually, then I have a question. Since you say that you actually enjoy speaking and sharing opinions, and how did you survive in grad school doing what you did? It's really technical, right? What you were doing.
Yeah, that's true. So if I understand correctly, you're asking how I ended up in grad school, if this was more my personality, what I'm describing now. Okay. So another part of my past is, well, then I have to go way back. My mom used to tell me quite often that it was so nice that I was smart when I was a kid. I did well in school, and she was always of the opinion that I didn't have to work hard for that. And she said that was a good thing. And I think she meant that just as a positive stimulation. What it did with me, though, is that it also formed my identity. So I saw myself as somebody who is smart. And in our society, of course, being smart is also seen as a good thing. And the higher education you get, the better it is. So that all sort of came together to make me want to get a high degree. I didn't even question it. It was just like, I can do that. I'm able to do it. So I'm doing it. And I actually had a good friend at one point who decided to take a little bit lower education just because that would bring her to where she wanted to be in life. And that was a conscious choice for her. And I just didn't understand. I was like, why would you choose to do a lower level education if you can do more? But in hindsight, that was actually my own caveat, that I couldn't see that I was pushing myself to that for that reason, never questioning if it was what I wanted to do, if it was something that made me happy.
That's such a good point. Actually, I have to add something here that I think, I'm not sure, maybe this is partially cultural thing, but actually I went through all my undergrad education in Poland, and I think we still have that thinking that the harder the study is, the more prestigious. So indeed, like I chose prestigious studies at the University of Warsaw and this interfaculty track because it was the most prestigious among prestigious, and it was also hard because we had more duties than other students, and really, and I can feel that actually, if you have this label of being smart, then you kind of, this is like a reinforcement loop. Then you try to stand up to the expectations and prove this by choosing the hardest studies, because that's to prove that all these people were right. This is and this can put you on the wrong track. And I totally agree with you. And actually, before I went to grad school, before I ended up as a PhD student in neuroscience, I also did very short study in economics, and I did a young MBA program, which was like a very short version of MBA. It was not a full version, but I really enjoyed it. I scored very well at the exams. It was very easy for me, very pleasant, enjoyable, but I never really thought about this as a career path, as a potential career path for me, because it was so easy. And I felt this is not noble enough, this is not hard enough, this is not challenging. So why would I do this? This is just this is too pleasant, so it can be a hobby. That was exactly my thinking. So I totally understand your point of view. I was thinking the same, but I changed, I think. And now, I kind of I share your opinion now. Okay, great. So, all right. So, actually, one of the reasons why we do these career talks is to basically give an overview at the potential careers after PhD. I think your career track is very unusual and very interesting. And I think many people who will watch this interview later might actually ask themselves, so how to get to politics, and actually what are the pros and what are the cons on this job. So how would you compare, what are the perks and what are the potential downsides, and what would you advise to people who would like to get to politics after their PhD?
Okay. Well, I'll start with the last question, like how can you start? Because the thing is, especially local politicians, but politicians in general, you can approach them. Part of their job is to represent people. So they're usually very approachable and friendly and interested in hearing stories of people, and also interested to answer questions that you may have. So if you just want to get in touch with politicians for whatever reason, then usually you can find their email address, their phone number, their social media account, and you can reach out. So I would definitely advise people who are interested by that to do that. Find somebody who seems to be of a political party that you may affiliate with, and just contact them. That's usually the best way to start, because you have to start somewhere, and once you know somebody, they can help you to figure out who you should talk to next, or what kind of meeting you could attend, for instance, to get a bit of a feeling of whether you enjoy being there and doing something. And there are all kinds of things you can do. You can be a politician like I am, but some political parties also have other positions, whether it's campaigning or whether it is, keeping the money of the party. There are all kinds of things you could be doing. So that's the important first step is to reach out. If I look back at my own story, how I got involved, as I said, I had a friend who was politically active, and I had a bit of a, small interest in politics to start with. And he, since he was my friend, makes sense that he has the similar kinds of norms and values that I have. So he was with a party that I actually usually voted for. So just by talking to him in a very informal way, I realized that I would like to be a member of this party. And then when I did that, I realized that was not so scary to do. He could also give me a bit of advice, like what sort of activities were going on and how I could join those. So at first I became active on a national level, in fact, in a theme group about higher education and science, which made a lot of sense at the time because I was a PhD. So I did that for a while, and I would meet with a few other people of the party who were interested in those topics from all over the country. But then those meetings were usually late at night. I got pregnant, and I can tell you the pregnancy is, it's not going well together with late nights. So I stopped that for a while. And then after the baby was born, we moved. And as I said, we bought a house. So instead of going back to the national level, I decided to become more active locally. And the nice thing about that, and then I get to the perks of this job that I have as a councilwoman. One of the nice things is that since it's local, you can visit the people and the organizations and the places that you make decisions about. So if some people are protesting something, or if some people have some questions, or if my party differs in opinion from the opinion of another party, then you can go and talk to the people involved, and you can just take your bike or even walk there, or sometimes you even know the people that you're talking about personally. And I really like that. And when you do something that people appreciate, then you also see like the impact you're having in your own environment. You see that, for instance, as I said, school buildings is one of the topics that we deal with in the gemeente. And that's in my domain. And there was a school that got a whole new building, and they're so happy with that. And it was a building that lived up to their expectations. And there was a lot of discussion about that, like how to finance it and what should and shouldn't happen. But in the end, everybody's happy with the result, and that's good to see. Another thing is that's flexible in the sense that during the day, a lot of people have day jobs. So you can do it next to another job if you want. And yeah, you can visit people or organizations or not. Some people are so busy with the rest of their lives that they don't really do that a lot. So it's flexible. You can, there's no model that you have to follow. You can be the politician that you want to be. What is not flexible, though, is that in the evenings you have a lot of meetings with like the city council or with other things. So that's less flexible. You're supposed to be there, and sometimes it takes a long time. Recently, we were there from 7:30 to 12 at night, and it's all, because of Corona, we're sitting behind a screen. And then there was not a single topic in my domain. So let me tell you, that was a long night. And you're supposed to be there and to be present and to know what's going on. So that's maybe the downside of it. Sometimes it can be boring in that sense. But then the good thing is that I can share the topics with some of the other people in my party. So I don't have to do all the topics on my own because that's too much work. Another downside. Well, it's not an actual job. So you get paid, but it's a stipend. It's not a salary. So you don't necessarily build up a pension. You don't get, sick days, stuff like that. Like I said, you can put as many or as few hours in as you want. So if you put a lot of hours in and you enjoy it, then your hourly wage is really low, in fact, because it's not paid as a full-time job. But you can definitely fill your whole week with it if you want. So financially, it's sometimes I refer to it as a paid hobby. You really have to enjoy doing it and wanting to spend your time that way. It's also not always nice for my relationship, if I'm honest, because sometimes, I'm away or at the computer in this case, like 4 nights in a row. And then I'm in bed after 11 and my husband's already asleep. That's not ideal. But then on the other hand, during the day, I have a lot of time with my kid. So, nothing is perfect. Yeah. And I think if I actually come back to how did I become a councilwoman when we bought a house, this house where I'm sitting right now, what I did to get started here is that I just looked at the website of the party, but then the local website, in this case, E027, Utrechtse Heuvelrug. And then there's contact information there. There's always contact information about people you can reach out to. And I simply sent an email. I said, hey, I'm Carmen. I'm a member of the party. I would like to know what's going on locally. Maybe I can do something. I would like to meet you guys. Can I come and drink a cup of coffee sometime? And actually, I went to several different meetings of different active groups to see what kind of activity I would like to be doing. And it became pretty clear very soon that I wanted to become an actual politician. Because like I said, I'm opinionated and I like to talk, so that seemed to be a good fit. And from there, it just grew. I took 2 years to just be on the sidelines and just supporting the politicians of that moment. But then the elections come around and some people, they stopped. They wanted to do something else. So in the end, I got a seat, which was nice, which is also a downside, by the way, because every 4 years there's elections and you could lose your seat.
Yeah, that's actually something I would like to ask you, because you mentioned that you are paid not as a salary, but as a fellowship. And is this for this reason that it's actually a fixed term period of how many? 4 years, right? Between the elections. So every 4 years you are validated by your community and you might actually lose your job. That's like a binary thing. So it's yes or no, right?
That's sort of true. Actually, if I tell you the story about how I got my seat right now, you'll see it's not entirely black and white. So first off, when the elections were coming up, there was some stuff going on at home. So I told the people of D66 that I didn't want to be high on the list of the elections. So if you, for people who are not familiar with the Dutch elections, I'll just quickly explain. If you go to the voting booth, then you get a list, and every party has like a whole column of names ranging from 1 to 40 or whatever. And you can vote for one of all those people. So I didn't want to be highly ranked for D66 because I knew that at the time it would be hard to combine that with my home life. So I didn't have a very high position, but I would still be on the list, which was a good thing at the time. Turned out I got a lot of votes. And if you get a lot of votes, then you move up the list. And I moved up the list so far that I got a seat, which was not in my planning, but it happened. And I was super happy and sort of honored that people voted for me. But I had to turn it down anyway, because I just couldn't combine it. Like I said, the evenings and even weekends that you spend on this, you need support at home, especially when you have children, but even if you don't, your partner needs to be okay with that. So I turned down the seat. I gave it to somebody else, but I kept, like first claim on any available seat later on. And lo and behold, a few months later, somebody in our party had to, move away from politics for personal reasons. The seat became available and I could do it. And now I'm actually, I hold that seat for now. So, so it's yes or no. You have a seat or you don't, but then things can change over time. And well, as far as the 4 years is concerned, obviously that's democracy. So people vote for the party that they like. And on local level, it's interesting that people usually vote based on the national party, while there can be a bit of a difference, that sometimes certain parties are, for instance, more conservative or more liberal or more something else, more green than their national party is. So it's good to look at that, but most people, they don't have the time they don't follow local politics. I get that. So yeah, then depending on what happens in national politics, you gain or lose votes. And what you can also have is that there's parties who quit or parties who start. So then you have to divide the same amount of seats over fewer or more parties, which also increases or decreases your own chance of having a seat. So it's a gamble, but that's democracy, and I think that's good, because we wouldn't want to have, the same people in charge for decades, obviously.
Yeah, but actually, it sounds like extremely scary, at least to me, that you might potentially lose your job, for instance, because one person at the top that represents your party in the government says something stupid and the ratings fall to the ground, and then all of a sudden you lose a few points in the polls, and then all of a sudden half of you have to go in the next elections. Like, there are so many factors that are independent of you, or the climate, political climate changes, and that party just loses in the polls just because populists actually grow or something like that. So,
for instance.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, yeah, it must be extremely stressful, actually. And actually, I have a question about the Dutch people in politics, because I've been here for almost a decade, but it always bugs me. To what extent do you think that Dutch society is into politics? Because actually, originally, when I came here first, that was actually the most shocking thing for me, that some people, when I asked them about the political views, they don't have any. And in Poland, that would be unthinkable. We are very, we are really black and white. There are like two sides of the political scene at the moment, and everyone is on one side or the other. It's like there is no middle ground, and we are very polarized in that sense. And for me, that was very unusual, that some people actually are not into politics. Maybe that might be because it's like a first world country where, it's like living standards are really high. So maybe this is not, maybe this is a property of first world societies, that there is less interest in politics. But like, I'm curious, what is your opinion here?
Well, I definitely recognize what you say. Plenty of people are not that interested in politics, Definitely not everybody votes. I always felt the obligation, because I feel it's a right that you have, but especially as a woman, it's a right that was gained for you like 100 years ago. So use it. But in fact, even though I felt strongly about that, especially when I was like in my early 20s, I wouldn't really know what I was voting about. Like, meaning, for instance, one time there was this new party coming on, the Party for the Animals. And little side note, I'm a vegan, so I feel strongly about animal rights. And I felt that the topics concerning animals were not discussed enough in politics. So I voted for the Party for the Animals without reading their election program or anything, just because I wanted them to shake up the discussion about these issues. I wouldn't do that now anymore, but now I know a lot more about what goes on in politics. So the issue there is that you really need to take time to familiarize yourself with the issues and to follow the different discussions and the opinions of different parties to figure out who you agree with the most. So yeah, not everybody does that, and I get that. There's a lot of stuff that you need to do in your daily life. I think the second thing is that what I hear a lot of Dutch people say is that, yeah, I like that party the most, but there are still things I disagree with. Well, yeah, of course, because a party is like a group of people. So I'll never have like the Party for Carmen unless I am my one person party, which is not going to work because nobody's going to vote for me except me. So you cannot find like the perfect party for you. You'll always have to accept that there are certain things that you disagree with. For instance, E027 is very strongly opinionated about having an elected mayor. That's one of the things that they've been saying since they were since the party started in 1966, and it's an important thing for them. But I disagree. Now, some people don't understand, like, how can you be part of D66 and still not want an elected mayor? But, you know, I agree on so many other levels, and there's no other party that I agree with more, that I think it's still the best fit. So I think that's also a problem of the Dutch people, that they're looking for the party that fits every single aspect of what they like. And the third thing I wanted to mention, when you said that maybe this is like a first world country where the living standard is very high, one thing I know is we have so many parties here in the national government that they always have to make a coalition with different, like 2, 3, 4 parties. I think 2 parties hasn't been seen in a long time, so 3 or 4, which means you always end up somewhere in the middle, because the extremes are not going to have enough votes to have the majority. And in fact, it's known that companies like to base themselves in the Netherlands for that, because it's always been like this. So they know it's going to be a stable environment for them. It's not going to swing from left to right and whatever. So maybe that's why some people are also not that interested, because they feel that on average, it averages out. So does it really matter? You know, some people are upset about that. They vote for a party and they want that policy to be instated. But then that party is in a coalition with different parties and they let go of that part of the policy that was important. People get upset. They say, yeah, I voted for you. Why don't you do what you said you would? Because of coalitions. That's why it doesn't run haywire here. So maybe that's a part of it.
But actually, honestly, I thought that companies like to be based in the Netherlands because it's a tax heaven, but perhaps also because of the politics. Actually, I would like to. I mean, I would like to avoid talking about my political views, because every time I'm talking about my political views, my religious beliefs, or my sexual orientation, I fall into trouble. So I would just in this conversation, I'm not. I will not touch this topic, but I would like to ask you. Soon we'll switch to another subject, but I would still like to ask you about some dirty truths about politics. So, because I think in the public view, politics is type of, like, it's this dirty scene where people are really career oriented, and I think a lot of young people, they actually don't really consider politics as their potential career path for that reason. And I would like to debunk this myth. So if you could tell us a little bit more how you see this, and if you really experience that you meet a lot of career-oriented people, and also in your view, what are the features of a successful politician? So those people who get to the very top, to like the top positions in the government, what do you think are their personal characteristics? So what makes them successful?
Okay. Well, when you talk about like dirty politics, I think it really depends. You know, you can find anything, just like in companies. You know, some companies have a very mild culture, some are very harsh. In politics, it's a bit the same. I usually say that I'm in politics here because I enjoy the atmosphere. We have a very nice group of people at D66, but also our collaboration with all the other parties is very friendly, which doesn't mean we always agree on everything. And sometimes, yes, we can really disagree, but it's never personal. So after a meeting, even if you had a harsh discussion, you always go and can have a drink with somebody and say, okay, you know, that's just the content, but on a personal level, we're fine. I know that in some other places, some other gemeentes, that's different. People really don't like each other sometimes. Some parties are sort of enemies. I don't like that, but it happens. So yeah, that just depends on your situation, I guess. And when you're looking at the people who become successful, well, one thing I've noticed is that having a network is important, at least speaking for D66. But I can imagine that that's true for other parties as well. because there will always be people who want to go up, and there are most likely more people who want to do that than there are seats to divide. So how do you stand out? And I think one thing is having a network in the party. So sometimes there are people who are new to politics and immediately rise to the top because they have like a professional background that really fits with a certain topic that they will be dealing with. For instance, for agriculture, the current national politician of D66 is a farmer, and he just brought his own experience and his point of view, and that was good. But I think for most people, it takes time, and there are different routes, but they all involve like getting to know people, getting to develop yourself as well as a politician, I guess, developing your views. And then at some point, if there is a good slot that fits with your expertise at that moment, you may have a chance. But that also depends on like the total group they're looking for. So as a politician, you're not working alone. You're usually working with other people representing the same party. So the total mix of people really matters because you want to cover all the topics and you want to have different personalities in there and you want the group to function well. So sometimes it has nothing to do with yourself or your qualities or your knowledge. It has everything to do with whether there's a spot that fits you at that moment. But networking, I think, is usually a good thing. And to do that, you should attend meetings, get to know people. What else if you want to become a successful politician? Well, like I said, if you're opinionated and you like to share your opinion, that helps as well. If you're well articulated, you can express yourself properly.
Mm-hmm.
So you can train that. There are things like media training. There's things like a debate course to develop those kinds of skills. So that's also something to work on if you want to really do this professionally, I would say.
And do you treat politics as your like way of living for the future, or do you think this is more like a stage in your career?
At this moment, honestly, I don't know. I could see myself continuing in politics because I enjoy it, and as long as I enjoy it, I don't know if I would turn away from it. But then, there are things like elections that can change the situation, and I might do something else. It doesn't pay all the bills, though. So one thing that I'm looking at right now is to find a day job to pay the bills. Because like I said, my company with Corona and even before that, it's hard. It's hard to really make money with that. So I enjoy doing it, but it's just not, I think, a feasible direction right now. So I'm trying to figure out what I would want to do, because as I described before, during my PhD and everything, I just did that because I thought I had to be the smart one, that was my identity, that was who I was. And then I did the coaching thing because of my experience during my PhD. So it's all been a bit reactive.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just thinking, maybe there are other jobs out there that I don't know about that I could do, that I would enjoy doing. So I'm thinking about that, looking into it, and I don't know where that's going to take me. So we'll see.
Okay, great. I'm sure it's going to be something interesting. But now let's talk a little bit about your coaching company. Very interesting stuff. So my first question is, what is your approach to coaching? Since I guess there are different schools of coaching, and the same as with therapy, there are different schools how to approach the therapy. So when you work with PhDs, what is your approach? So what do you pay attention to? What are the more important points of your coaching technique? If that's not the secret, of course.
No, I don't think I have any big secret techniques. I think if I would have to sum it up, the most important thing is that a coachee has to be able to take control of the situation they're in. So I'm there to create a safe space. I'm there to provide useful exercises. I'm there to provide encouragement, to provide a mirror and feedback, but I cannot do the actual work for them. So I expect a coachee to be motivated and to be able to, to take charge. If their situation is such that this is too much to ask of them, then I refer them to other help, because I think that's only fair. You know, there are limits to what I can do. And if you need other professional help, then I refer them to that.
Yeah, I feel for you. I think that this is a often problem that actually PhDs, and I had that too, actually. I had also had hard times during my PhD, but I didn't really search for help until it was too late. So I think many PhD candidates, they only kind of get the concept that they are in trouble when they are already burnt out, and they just wait for way too long before asking for help. And then at some point, you're already in the state of mind when you have this like learned helplessness developed, and you cannot really do much more, and you are already in this passive mode when you cannot really proactively search for solutions. So it's really I know what you mean, because I think this is a mistake many PhDs do. And so I guess these are these hardest cases, right, that you can encounter, because yeah, indeed, I get it. I mean, you cannot really it's like if you find yourself in a difficult spot in your PhD, you have to maneuver yourself out of it. It's more like a strategic game at this point, and it's hard to do it without energy. That's for sure. Okay, so could you maybe tell us a little bit more about the company? So because I know that you're not doing this alone, you also have some collaborators, and if you could tell us a little bit more about what your company is doing, and also about your course, so a little bit more insights about your company.
So I started this company to give individual coaching to PhD candidates, and that's still something that I really enjoy doing. However, individual coaching, especially for maybe 8 sessions or so, it's expensive for most PhDs, and it's not always certain or obvious what they'll get out of it. So that's sometimes a big step to take immediately. So I've also started to offer other things, like a sort of mini coaching of just 2 sessions, and also workshops and presentations for organizations that work with PhDs, which is actually an interesting way of reaching PhDs and to help a group of PhDs at the same time. And building on that, I work together with Julio Peroncelli from Next Scientist to create an online course where it is an actual full coaching program. But since we just filmed it once and we put the exercises and the movies online, it's a lot cheaper to do it. And it's called Unstuck Your PhD. And it's really aimed at PhDs, like I said, who are in this PhD dip, who are unmotivated, who have issues with their continuing their PhD, who may be wondering, why am I doing this, or should I continue this or not, or who just don't know how to pick themselves up again and how to get their projects back on track. So this whole training, Unstuck Your PhD, is aimed at getting them back to a moment where they have a planning that's realistic, that they can follow to finish their PhD, or at least get, depending on where you are in your PhD, at least get it back on track. But the course is created in such a way that it's also possible to reach the conclusion that your PhD is just not what you want to be doing and you want to be doing something else. And then you make a plan for that. So in the end, you really discover what is bothering you, why this is bothering you, and what you actually want. And then from all those questions and the answers you get for yourself, you work towards how to get to the point where you want to be. Like I said, since it's an online course, I mean, now with Corona, that's of course perfect. People can do it at their own pace, at the moment that's convenient to them. And it's just a lot more affordable. So that makes it interesting. And it's possible to do the course together with coaching. So then you can discuss your exercises with me online. But that's not necessary. It's a standalone course. And I have to say that that's been quite popular. So it really seems that the money is, is an issue in most cases, because PhDs just don't always make that much money, depending on where they are in the world. And this Unstuck Your PhD has really resonated internationally with a lot of different people from a lot of different countries participating.
Great. So if I understand correctly, this course is already on offer, right? And it's available online. So we'll link the course in the description of this movie. So please take a look below to find the link to the course. Okay, yeah, that's a very good idea. And actually, I have a question regarding what you just said, because if you as a PhD student, if you search for help during your PhD and you have those doubts, shall I continue my PhD or shall I maybe look for something else and just forget about it? Then if you search for any form of coaching at the university, they will obviously tell you have to continue, especially if you're close to the end of your contract. They have their best interest in telling you to continue. And at least in the Netherlands, because of the system we have, that actually this is beneficial for the faculty if you continue. But what is your standpoint? Because from what you said, I presume that you also think that in some situations it justifies to break your PhD and just go do something else. So if you could share your opinion on this topic.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a conflict of interest there. If you're speaking of a situation where the PhD candidate in question is struggling with the PhD to a point where they do not want to continue, and that's a very valid standpoint to have. And then if the professor wants the person to continue because they will receive money when the PhD is finished, then that is a clear conflict of interest. And maybe the professor will want to provide help or support or whatever. But in the end, they just want you to graduate. And the PhD candidate, on the other hand, may not want to do that because of whatever reason. It doesn't even matter what the reason is. You're not bound to this PhD. You're not defined by your PhD. And they cannot force you. I mean, just imagine any other job where you would want to leave and your boss is telling you, well, I don't know if you can leave. No, I mean, come on, you're not a slave. You can leave when you want to leave. Question though is it too scary to leave sometimes, especially if you're near the end, like you said, you're almost there. Most people will want to finish because then all their effort has not been in vain. But even that, if it's too hard, you deserve help and you deserve a break. And you shouldn't be pushed to continue if you're struggling that much. When I look at professors as supporters, as coaches, in fact, of their own PhDs, as supervisors, I think there's a world that could be gained in good coaching skills, good supervision skills. And it's not always the professor, him or herself, who is to blame. Because if you look at how the professorship is being tailored, they're hired because they have good publications or they bring in funds. They're being rewarded for having good publications and bringing in funds. They're being judged on that. They're being, they are in competition with each other over that. They're not being like celebrated for their great teaching ability. They're not paid more because their PhDs are so happy with their coaching and because they help their PhDs through a hard time. No, they're not, so if they're not naturally good at supervising PhDs, or if the click between the professor and the PhD is not naturally there, then it's not that strange that they don't have the skills to really cope with that situation properly. So they should, I think most of them would want to be good supervisors and they genuinely care about the well-being of their PhDs, but they just don't have the time to really invest in that. So they should get that time. They should be required to take proper training. They should be rewarded for doing well. Their supervising skills should be part of their annual evaluation, stuff like that. And actually, this brings me back to my political work, because even though I'm a local politician, I do have an influence nationally in my party as well. And I am now taking some action to get professors to that level, to get them that space, to get them that recognition. Because they're also in a very tight spot sometimes. They're also overworked. They're also struggling in some areas, can be at least. So I don't think they're all bad eggs, not at all. Although I also have to say, some people inside the walls of academia, they're a bit socially awkward. That won't be a surprise to anyone who has been in science when I say that. And that's also a fact of life, I think. So sometimes that's also what it is. But none of that is any reason to push yourself beyond your own boundaries. You have to guard your own boundaries and you have to guard your own mental and physical health and your own well-being. Because if you don't do it, nobody else is going to do it for you.
Right. And actually, when you go to industry, no one will care. I mean, so it's also that I think in academia, my feeling is that sometimes it's okay to express, the way you feel. For instance, on academic Twitter, you can, express your frustration from work, and this is actually, met with acceptance from the community and a lot of support. But in industry, like if you say something that might put your employer in a bad light, like something about your frustration, everyday frustration at work, then you're out. That's like, there's much less understanding to your, feelings, and especially related to your workplace. So you have to have a good command over your mental health, and it's like your responsibility to take charge of it. So the sooner you learn, the better, because again, out of academia, it won't be tolerated that you are walking around depressed. That's gonna be seen as your as your weakness as an employee. So indeed. Okay. So my next question would be, if you could maybe share one piece of advice that you think is especially important for all those PhD candidates that struggle with at work for whatever reasons. They are in doubt if they should continue, or they feel they need help. So just one piece of advice that might help them get better today.
Well, I don't know about getting better today. Although one thing is, talk to somebody. That can be scary, but it's usually a good first step. Somebody you trust. Doesn't have to be somebody at work. Could be. But it could also be somebody in your private life. But just share your frustrations, share your anxieties, share your tiredness, or whatever is bothering you. Because once you share it, you're not carrying that burden alone. Somebody else knows about it. And that's an important first step. So that's always something good to do. But I think some other advice I would like to give that I thought about before we started this webinar. You want to avoid, if you can, getting to the point where you're struggling and wondering if you want to leave your PhD. And one thing that I recognize in a lot of academics is that the work they're doing, whether they're in academia or in industry or whatever, it's very intellectual. So it's tempting to always be in your head and think about things and reason about things and, you know, derive the logical conclusion. But emotions, feelings, your well-being is not a logical thing. It's not a rational process. So rationalizing your feelings is a big pitfall for a lot of academics. And to avoid that a little bit, it's important to get out of your head when you have spare time. And whatever works for you is good. You know, some people like to exercise, to get back into their bodies and connect with their bodies. You know, you can do any kind of exercise you want, whether it's just walking or whether it's like something like martial arts or climbing or mountain biking. Anything that you're interested by, you could use for that. Another thing that could work is meditation or something like it, praying or whatever is your cup of tea, just to connect with your inner life, you know, not with your body per se, but really with your inner goings on, because it's too easy to skip that, forget about it, rationalize it away. And you could do that with some breathing exercises or some yoga if you want. You know, those are also things you can do. And a third thing that could work is to go into nature. You know, just don't stay indoors all day. Don't stare at a screen like this all the time. But make sure you get fresh air, and preferably in a green environment. You know, some people, they live in cities, they don't have the luxury of going really into nature. So I hope that even in those situations, people can try and do that every now and then. But for those who are close to a forest or a beach or grassland or anything, just go there and take a walk, take a bike ride, breathe the fresh air, look into the distance, enjoy, you know, the sun or the rain or whatever the day is bringing. That's something that can also really bring you back to yourself and get you out of your head. So those are three things I could advise: exercise, meditate, and go to nature. And if you do that regularly, it will help you stay grounded a little bit more and hopefully prevent you know, excessive stress, and maybe make you aware of stress before it you know, it really overflows you.
Okay. Actually, I have some question about the fact that you did all the things you did, including PhD, and then starting a political career, and starting a company, while at the same time being a young mother. So I have to confess that when I was in academia as a PhD student, I never really felt any imposter syndrome. So like imposter syndrome is something that like quite common in academia, but actually I never really thought, worse in any way than other students, just different because everyone has a different project. But actually now, once I started the company, sometimes I feel this is the first time ever when I sometimes feel the complex, and that's exactly because of people like you. You're the guilty one, because of the people who are so good at multitasking. So they are perfectly capable of merging and marrying like 2 different careers or 3 different careers sometimes with family life. And my question is, so how do you do this? Do you have some specific like schedule or practice that you use to keep afloat and actually be able to juggle all these different activities? Do you have some secrets to share?
Well, maybe I will start with bursting your bubble a little. Like I mentioned, at some point well, I don't know if it was a burnout, but I crashed because of all the different things I was doing in my professional and my private life. So I don't think there's a secret in that sense, but I did learn something from that moment. I learned that it's important to prioritize my own health. It's too easy to get caught up doing things for other people, whether it's colleagues, whether it's my children, whether it is other people that may, my family, my friends. It's always nice to be helpful and to have a good relationship with people. But I have to prioritize myself, because if I'm not healthy, then I'm not going to be able to do any of those other things. Then when I look at my current situation, well, my daughter is older now, so that's easier. She's not a baby anymore. And my 2 jobs as an entrepreneur and as a politician are very flexible. So I decide how much time I put in, which is in a way harder than being an employee somewhere, because as an employee, you have very clear expectations and you have very clear hours. And you don't decide how much you need to do, but there is an end, right? When it's 5 o'clock, you clock out, you go home, and that's it. While here I am on a Sunday night in this webinar with you, and same goes for politics. If there's an interesting meeting during the weekend or an evening where I would be free otherwise, I will want to join. So that makes it harder, because I'm doing that out of genuine interest, and then it's important to again guard my own boundaries and be aware of my own limitations and take a break when I need a break, and not feel guilty when I'm not productive 100% of the time, for instance. And when you're talking about imposter syndrome, there's still a part of me that genuinely thinks that I got my PhD by accident. And I know that when I say it out loud, it sounds crazy. But it's just, as I said, feelings are not rational. And I guess there's part of me that still doesn't believe that I deserved it, that my thesis was good enough, etc. So I definitely recognize those feelings. And if I look at how you approach your company, I also look up to that. You're very structured and you seem to have a clear goal that you're working towards. So combining all these different things, sometimes I feel I make very little progress in every single one of them, while you seem to be, very focused on one topic and making more progress maybe because of that. So I don't know if like juggling different things is always a good thing, but it keeps things interesting. It's nice to have those different kinds of stimulation.
Well, someone has to juggle, someone has to produce new voters, so it's good that you took that responsibility for all of us. Okay, great. This is. I still think that probably you just undermine your achievements here, and that it must be very difficult what you're doing. That's for sure. Great, fantastic. And okay, so thank you for all this advice. And maybe let me ask you, just to end this webinar today. Let me ask you, what shall we wish you for the future? To you, your company, your political party, and
I think what I would wish myself the most is to be content, to be enjoy what life brings, and that goes beyond my professional life as well. Mm-hmm. So if my professional life can contribute to me feeling happy and feeling useful, and I think that would be good. That would be a good life.
Well, actually, great. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us today, and I would like to cordially thank Carmen for joining us and for sharing all these insights. Thank you so much, Carmen, for being with us.
Thank you, Natalia. It was very nice. It was my pleasure to be here.
And one little announcement is that today, the second edition of my book, What is Out There for Me, The Landscape of Post-PhD Career Tracks, is coming out. So if you didn't check it out yet, maybe this is a good occasion, because the second edition is much thicker than the first one. Like I added, I think, 60 or 70 pages of information. So I'm very proud of how it's going, and yeah, I think it's a lot of information and a lot of quality per price. So check it out. And thank you again for your attention. And I hope that we gave you a food for thought today about your political careers, perhaps. So it's definitely worth checking out if you also like discussing and have a lot of ideas for how to improve on our society. And thank you for your attention.